What's up?
Good glorious evening to you all.
Yeah, what he said. I'm gonna try to be as positive as I can, but I feel like absolute dog shit. So we're just gonna freaking drive the suckfest through the show and just keep going. Because I feel like a complete
That's right.
bag of smashed assholes. So on that note, what's going on,
And not
everybody?
just a can, a bag.
A bag. A big ass industrial like Dexter black garbage bag that Dexter would use to get rid of evidence.
Correct.
That kind of bag.
Yep.
But regardless, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Battle Bros podcast. I'm Count Crudula. This is Alamo. Yeah, I'm sitting in for Mac
Howdy.
today because I feel like dog shit. Yeah, he's getting over it. I'm kind of still not as far down the road as he is. So yeah. Welcome to winter.
Hey.
So anyway, hope everybody had a good week. For those of us that caught our show last week was episode 094 entitled Loyalty. I realize now we said we're going to put out some kind of release on social media if we're going to have a show this week. Yeah, we didn't do it because we're both feeling like crap. Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, but deal with it. We got another topic-based show this week. Something that Alamo and I can very easily discuss.
Oh,
ad
yes.
nausea for this one. We'll get to that in a little bit. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show, let's look at the appetizer.
Potatoes.
So, in the news this week, I'm sure there's and if you hear us clicking on and off with our microphones, we're just we're not trying to do that in your car stereo.
Yeah, we don't want to blow your eardrums or your
AirPods.
speakers. Yeah,
exactly. So if you hear us just cut out and just go un momento, por favor, click, doing that kind of shit on the screen. That's what we're doing,
basically.
So
yeah.
So today being December 6th, tomorrow is December 7th, 2024, which is the 83rd anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, which was the event that catapulted the United States into the throes of World War II. If you've seen the movie Pearl Harbor, it's pretty good, minus the whole... We don't have to put all that up, Alamo. I'm just going to kind of hit
the whole love interest thing.
Yeah, we're just going to kind of hit the hot points here. So, but they did a pretty good job of John Voight portraying FDR in the movie. December 7th, 1941, a day which will live in infamy.
In infamy.
Yeah, does a really good job of that.
The United States of America was deliberately and suddenly attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Alamo, everybody. Yeah. Alamo, there you go. Like, dude, you need to get into the voice work like now. Like, let's.
I know. I keep on seeing like training courses where I can go through it.
Let's do it. You can probably use your post 9/11 GI Bill. Hey. Anyway, so the Japanese referred to the attack as the Hawaii Operation and Operation Owl and as Operation Z during its planning. The Empire of Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor was preceded by months of negotiations between the U.S. and Japan over the future of the Pacific. Japanese demands include the U.S. ended sanctions against Japan, cease aiding China in the Second Sino-Japanese War, and allowed Japan to access the resources of the Dutch East Indies. Anticipating a negative response, Japan sent out its naval attack groups in November of 41, just prior to receiving the whole note, which states that the United States desire that Japan withdraw from China and French Indochina. Japan attended the attack as a preventative action. Its aim was to prevent the United States Pacific Fleet from interfering with its planned military actions in Southeast Asia against overseas territories of the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and the United States. Over the course of 7 hours,
Hmm.
Japan conducted coordinated attacks on the U.S. held Philippines, Guam, and Wake Island, and on the British Empire in Malaya, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Now, what made this pretty much crazy was the fact that it happened very early in the morning. It happened. It was 7:48 a.m. Hawaiian time on a
I was
Sunday
just about to
afternoon.
say it was like 7 something in the morning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the base was attacked by 353 Imperial Japanese aircraft, including fighters, level and dive bombers, and torpedo bombers in two waves, launched from 6 aircraft carriers. And that is where we get the term uh, um, kamikaze. The kamikaze pilots pretty much knew they weren't coming back. They were crashing their planes into these ships. Kamikaze was, I believe, translates to divine wind. Um,
Hmm.
if I remember correctly. So, but there was a lot of
Indeed.
things that happened. There was a lot of things that went wrong. There was a new radar installation that was out there close to Hawaii somewhere, and they kept getting these readings that were just massive in size. And they said, "Oh, it's got to be something on the fritz. It's new, whatever."
Hmm.
So that was kind of a big faux pas there. All in all, about 2,300 people were killed. 2,403, of which just over 2,000 were sailors, 100 were Marines, 208 were soldiers, 68 civilians, and then you had 1,178 military and civilians wounded. 4 battleships were sunk, 4 battleships were damaged, 1 ex-battleship sunk, 1 harbor tug sunk, 4 midget submarines sunk, 1 midget submarine grounded, 29 aircraft destroyed, 74 aircraft damaged, 129 killed, and 1 sailor captured.
Damn, how the hell did one sailor get captured?
I think that was on the side of Japan. So those
That makes
midget subs,
sense.
that what I just mentioned, those were the that was a Japanese loss. They lost 29 aircraft, 74 were damaged, 129 were
There was
killed,
a
and one
sub that was destroyed that day too. I thought. Remember? I'm almost positive there was a sub that was destroyed that day too.
on our side.
No, on the Japanese side.
Well, I said there were
It's either that or it was spotted.
4 Japanese midget submarines were sunk. 1 midget submarine was grounded,
Gotcha.
and then all the other kind of stuff there. So yada 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 yada. So yes, a very very poignant. Excuse me. A very big poignant part of World War II history where we got catapulted into the throes of World War II on the side of the Allies against the axis of evil, being Russia and Germany and Japan. So,
Speaking of Germany, I was watching a fairly interesting little kind of like a docu video, if you will, that theorized that Hitler actually survived the war. And they actually had documents in that little kind of thing to kind of back up that like CIA documents that said like, oh, so and so said that, you know, their friend who they didn't want to mention before, they confirmed like Adolf Hitler actually survived in, I think it was Mari Calco or something like that, Argentina somewhere.
Maricon.
Yeah, there you go. Afuera. Um, but but
That's awesome.
but yeah, like basically like many Nazis actually had, you know, fled to Argentina. There was actually a lot of Nazis that fled to Argentina, which was fairly interesting.
So, of the ships that we had lost, the battleship Arizona was hit by 4 armor-piercing bombs, exploded, total loss, not salvaged. 1,177 dead, later memorialized. The Oklahoma was hit by 5 torpedoes, capsized, total loss, salvage, sank en route to scrapping May 1947, 429 dead. West Virginia was hit by 2 bombs, 7 torpedoes, sunk, returned to service in July of 44, 106 dead. California was hit by 2 bombs, 2 torpedoes, sunk, returned to service January of 44, 104 dead. Nevada was hit by 6 bombs, 1 torpedo, beached, but returned to service October of 42, 60 dead. The Pennsylvania, which was Admiral Husband E. Kimmel's flagship to the United States Pacific Fleet, was in dry dock, hit by 1 bomb and debris from the USS Cason, which is a destroyer. Remained in service, but 9 deceased. Tennessee hit by 2 bombs, returned to service February of 42, 5 deceased. Maryland hit by 2 bombs, returned to service February 42, 4 deceased, including float plane pilot shot down.
Hmm.
Um, the USS Utah, which was a former battleship, it was a training / target AA training ship, hit by two torpedoes, capsized, total loss, salvage stopped, 64 dead, later memorialized. The cruisers Helena, Raleigh, and Honolulu were also damaged. The Helena, and the Raleigh returned to service in January and February of 42, respectively. The Honolulu was a near miss, light damage, and remained in service. Excuse me. The Cassin, which I mentioned earlier, for the what was that? Yeah, right here, the Pennsylvania was in dry dock with the Cassin in the Downs. So in dry dock, hit by 1 bomb, burned, reconstructed, and returned to service February 44. The Downs was in dry dock, caught fire from the Cassin, burned, reconstructed, and returned to service November 43. The Helm, damaged by 2 near miss bombs, continued patrol, dry docked in 42, and sailed. Wow. It dry docked January 15th of 42 and then sailed January 20th of 42. The Shaw was hit by 3
Damn.
bombs and returned to service June of 42. There's also some auxiliaries and a whole bunch of stuff. There was a big salvage operation that was led by Captain Homer and Wallen. I've heard it going out there to see the actual, like, the Arizona Memorial is pretty
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Like, it's pretty neat. The USS Arizona
Yeah.
Memorial is like, and they're still finding guys out there, and they're still burying them and adding their names to the wall out there, which is pretty crazy. So
Damn.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the guys, there was one of the guys, one of the ships where they won, like they came in second place on like the Battle of the Bands, so they were allowed to sleep in that morning, and that's what caused a lot of them to get killed. They never even made it out of the wreck. Air raid
Damn.
sirens started going off, and they just freaking got wiped out. But yeah, a lot of these, there a lot of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the planes they were flying were Mitsubishi Zeros, which
Mm.
is, yeah, it's pretty
Very
formidable.
fast. Very fast planes for the time.
Oh yeah,
Very fast. Because they were light. They were like. A lot of the plane was made of freaking wood.
yeah.
So they were
And those
light. They
guys, I
had
mean,
very
they had to have
strong,
known.
powerful engines.
They had to have known they weren't coming back. So,
Hmm.
so they used 6 aircraft carriers: the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, the Hiryu, the Shokako, and the Zuikako. Departed Hirokapo Bay back in November of 41.
Mm.
Wow. Crazy. So, Yep,
Hell yes.
83 years ago that happened.
Yeah. God bless them boys that freaking fought,
Yep.
survived the attack as well, because they went on to freaking contribute to the war effort afterwards.
And it was funny, and like the ironic thing was the fact that Churchill said right afterwards, he's like, "America's going to win the war," and we just got into this. He's like, "America, they've woken the giants." So,
Hmm. You know what's funny about that statement? I think it's supposedly that um I think it was what was it, the Japanese admiral, that he actually said that I'm like that, or they're saying that I'm afraid we may have just awoken a sleeping giant. Apparently, there's a lot of historical data that says that he probably did not actually say that. Like they're just, it was mainly punch. When I found that out, um, I was actually really surprised because I had to think. I'm like, really? They're saying he didn't say that after all? Okay, interesting.
well, yeah, I mean, plus when you talk about movies, they're going to sensationalize it for the sake of
Yeah.
selling tickets to movies and shit. So, but yeah, tomorrow that was 83 years ago, the attack on Pearl Harbor, which catapulted us into the World War II.
So
Um,
mama.
pretty much the one of the big things that brought us out of the depression as well during the
Hmm.
30s, turned us from a depression economy to a wartime economy rapidly.
Yup.
And there were so many things that changed after World War II. So during the course of World War II, you had a lot of females getting out, like Rosie the Riveter, that stereotype of women going out and being on the construction, on the mechanic, the assembly lines, and that kind of thing. That was probably one of my
Hmm.
favorite periods in high school to study was World War II. You know,
Yeah.
back in the 40s. I mean, not just because of the war, but just the way everybody carried themselves. Most guys wore suits and fedoras and all that stuff, and ladies wore dresses. It was just like, oh my god, it was just such a great time. And there's
Yeah.
also one of my favorite movies is 1941, which if you haven't seen that movie, it's fantastic. So the whole premise is after Pearl Harbor, the whole western seaboard from Washington State all the way down California, mass paranoia is setting in because they think, "Oh my God, we're next." They hit Hawaii, they're
Yep.
going to continue coming east, which was a real thing. But
Hmm.
they kind of take that and play it up a little bit and have fun with it. It was and there's so many good actors in that movie. Oh my gosh, you've got Tim Matheson, you got John Belushi, you got John Candy, you got the late great Treat Williams, Robert Stack, you've got um, oh god, the guy that played Otis in the Superman movies. What the hell was his name? Now I gotta look that shit up. It's gonna bug the fuck out of me. Jesus. And that movie came out in 70. Oh, it's a Steven Spielberg movie. That's right.
You know what's
Ned
crazy?
Ned Beatty. Ned Beatty. That's who that was.
I have not seen 1941. Dude, I think I was like 17. So it was the last time I watched it.
Are you shitting me? Oh,
Dead
dude,
serious.
we gotta get together.
I barely remember it because it's
We
been
gotta
that
get
long.
together and watch that movie, bro. Oh my
I
god, that movie's so fantastic. Yeah, dude. Oh, I
gotta see if I can
freaking
find it
love
somewhere.
that movie. I think I got a copy of it. But just, I
Do
mean,
you
just a
really?
I think so.
Shit.
Just, it's such a great movie. Dan Aykroyd, Ned Beatty, Belushi, John Candy, Christopher Lee, Tim Matheson,
Dude,
Toshiro Mifune.
while you're on Dan Aykroyd actually was in the 2001 Pearl Harbor movie. I don't remember what um
Dan
I don't
Aykroyd was?
yeah, it was a very short stint. It was like maybe a few minutes in time. Like I don't remember who he played, but he played one of the guys that, was the one deciphering the code that, the Japanese were using
What
to
year did that movie come out?
Which one?
What he was in? He said he was in Pearl Harbor.
2001. Yeah.
Captain Harold Thurman is who he played.
Captain
See,
Harold
I
Thurman.
remember Pearl Harbor, dude, but I haven't seen that movie in a while. We'd have to go back and watch that too.
Three
Pearl
hour long
Harbor.
movie. Excuse me. I have the
What
two
was the
disc
other
edition.
movies that came out about that? There was
There was Midway as well. Midway.
no, it wasn't
It
that one. It was the two Eastwood movies that he did. Um about what was
Letters from Iwo Jima
and
and
Flags of Our
Flags of Our
Fathers.
Fathers. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never seen those and I hear they're fantastic.
Yeah. I honestly I've heard the same thing. Um speaking of, actually, now that I'm thinking of it, I'm remembering now. Um Black Rifle Coffee actually did a veterans react, and they had actual Pacific theater veterans watching clips from not only those two movies, but from a couple of different movies
Oh,
that
I think
took
it was
place
like
in that
Vietnam
era.
vets watching movies about Vietnam or some stuff.
Yeah. Well, Black Rifle, they have like vets from every era, like,
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of
checking out
that
the
those
movies and
videos.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's cool as hell, actually.
Yep. Good stuff, man. Yeah. 1941 is a war comedy from Steven Spielberg, and it's a fantastic movie. So if you haven't seen it, if you want to watch something and just laugh ridiculously, it's so good. There are so many good people. Directed by Spielberg, written by Bob Zemeckis, who was the director of
Oh man,
um,
Bob Zemeckis too.
Forrest Gump, and then Bob Cale, who's also another. He also was he was one of
It's
the
crazy to
co-writers
think how
for
many of these guys were attached to such great work
oh
in
yeah,
the past.
Bob Gale was one of the writers behind Back to the Future.
Nice.
Yeah.
McFly, hello.
But there's just so many good people in this movie. Oh my gosh. It's just there's too many to list. You could spend all day doing it. It's just fantastic. It's so good. Have to get the director's cut, which is 146 minutes.
Of which
You know,
one? The
for
1941?
yeah, for a movie that came out in 1979, the budget was 35 million. It grossed 94.9 at the box office.
That's pretty
That's
damn impressive
pretty
for back
damn
then.
good. Yeah, that ain't no slouch.
you're you're talking about the equivalency today of, like, if it was 35 million then, like the equivalency of probably like 90, almost 100 million now.
I
And
just love Belushi in that movie. He's like, my name's Captain Wild Bill Kelso. Don't you forget it. Like his character is just so fucking over the top, dude. It is so good. We're 23 minutes in. We haven't even started the topic yet. Oh my god, we're going off on a tangent
damn.
here. Right. So yeah, tomorrow is the 83rd anniversary of Pearl Harbor. It's a pretty big deal. So check that out.
Yep.
All right. So getting into the topic that we are going to talk about this week, something that Alamo and I know a good amount on. We are talking about the subject for episode 095.
Oh my god, it was even worse than I thought.
What?
35 million today would be worth, or back then would have been worth 205,357,620 today. It's a big freaking budget.
So how much would $94.9 million been? Because that's how much it grossed.
94.5?
94.9 mil
94.9.
in today's figures.
Ain't no slouch. That would have been 556,812,520.
Yeah. It's Classic, man.
Hmm.
It's such a great movie, dude. If anybody says it's a better science comedy of action comedy, I'd be like, yeah, no. So anyway, so this week we are talking about the subject for episode 095 of the Battle Bros podcast. We are talking about the subject of rejection.
Yes.
Okay. This is something that is near and dear to any military veteran's hearts. At one point or another, you're going to get rejected for something. Hey, you might not have made the basketball team or the football team or the wrestling team or cross country or swimming in high school. Shit happens. It's kind of one of those things. It's like it's going to happen in your life.
Sure is.
Acclimatize yourself now. I can't talk. I'm making up words here. Acclimatize yourself now.
We speak words.
I think words. I sound like Sid from friggin' Ice Age. So, what exactly is the definition of rejection? Well, hell, I'm glad you asked, folks. Let's look at this real quick. So, rejection is the dismissing or refusing of a proposal, idea, etc., the spurning of a person's affection. So, rejection being like you're okay. I'm gonna tell you a really awful thing that I did once, and I should have known better. I was just really stupid, really young, trying to impress. It's my first job working at my first gun range, and I got involved with operating the range and being a range safety and all that stuff. Sales was good, but I liked that aspect of it. I kind of got volunteered for it and just kind of got stuck there for the next 5 years. But I would sell from time to time in retail and whatnot. But I went to my boss and I was like, dude, I got a great idea for helping to clean up the range. He's like, what you got? I'm like, well, check it. They say, brooms and dustpans are an OSHA violation because you're constantly sweeping around lead powder and gunpowder and lead residue and all that kind of stuff. I was like, dude, I got a simple solution. He's like, yeah. I'm like, magnets. We just use magnets to pick up the brass. He just kind of goes, oh, Mac, you special, special little boy. And I'm like, what? He's like, brass isn't magnetic. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to go back to work then. And it was a good running joke for probably I would say a good month. So like, hey Mac, did you see that shipment of brass magnets came in the back? I'm like, yeah, I must have missed that one. It was worth it. I had it coming. It was worth a chortle, but whatever. But yeah, oh yeah, I got shot down hard, freaking hard. But also rejection, and if you're in the dating world nowadays, you know what rejection looks like. Somebody
Yeah.
ghosts you, or you freaking try to like somebody, and they just kind of like, yeah, no thanks, and they just shut you down.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Whatever. So,
Hmm.
but Alamo picked up some pretty good articles, and kind of the one, we're going to talk about this from a couple of different angles, but the one thing that kind of really resonated with the both of us is the fact that you had all of these guys coming home after serving in Vietnam. Now, mind you,
Vietnam.
a lot of these guys didn't want to be there. They got drafted, they went over, they had honorable service, they did their part, they came home. And when they came home, they were say, "Hey, don't wear your uniform, grow a fucking beard, don't talk about being in the service. You're gonna get spit on, you're gonna get called baby killer, and people are gonna be shitty nasty to you." And that's exactly what happened. And I have to
Sure
say,
is.
I have to thank the mettle and the wherewithal and the fortitude of those Vietnam vets, because those are the guys that turned around when GWAT kicked off and said, "Hey, we're going to make sure that none of you guys come home to the kind of shit that we came home to." So there's that. So we're going to make sure that doesn't fucking happen. So it sucks they went through it because that's absolute horseshit. But at the same time, props to all the guys that served in Vietnam that did their job, didn't, came home and hopefully, one piece for the most part, and
Yeah.
just said, hey, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen to the next group of guys that come through, because now in the next conflict, that's going to be our torch, our cross to bear. GWAT guys are going to come up to the next guys and be like, whoa, 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 hold on, they're doing something they don't want to do. They're getting drafted or they're getting called for involuntary service. So as you
Yup.
fucking were, fuck down, hua. go from there. So, but Alamo found quite a few good articles on this. I'm gonna let him kind of take over and do the reading on these because I'm about to lose my voice. So Alamo, whenever you're ready, you take it away. You go as little or as in
so
depth as you want to go, and we can rock on from there.
so the first article I found, hold one. I'm gonna share this. It is from providencejournal.com. It is called The Dark Side of America's Welcome Home. Vietnam vets recount harassment and disrespect. Um, if there's really one thing that we can really um notate from what happened back then, it was that when the Vietnam vets went over to Vietnam, they went through some hell. They didn't know who their enemy was. Things happened, right? Um, and because of that, there's a huge amount of trauma that's related to that. That kind of it's a psychological like mind job, right? Because you're thinking about the fact that as you're fighting, you don't know who your enemy is, but you know, because you're running into your buddies getting killed, get buddies getting blown to bits, right? And the people there hate you. You know what I'm saying? Because there's some people that maybe you might have killed their families, maybe you might have shot like a family member, whatever. Um, and winning the hearts and minds was kind of the goal, but at the end of the day, it ended up not being the case because so many people were frustrated with the way things were going in the country because you had the communist, you know, Viet Cong, and you had the North Vietnamese army doing their thing, right? Well, in this article, it talks about how the Vietnam vets, when they went over, they dealt with all that stuff, and they came back over. It talks about what they went through. So here we go. I was not prepared for the number, quality, and intensity of responses we received after requesting homecoming recollections from Vietnam vets. Wayne Smith of Warwick earned his combat medic badge with the Ninth Division in the Mekong Delta. He painted an especially graphic picture of his reintroduction to the world as we described it back in the day. Returning vets flew into West Coast Air Force bases. They received a good meal, vouchers for civilian flights home, and a bus ride to Seattle, Oakland, or San Francisco Airport. Now, in quotes, it says, once we arrived at SFO, soldiers rolled into any store that sold pants, shirts, vests, anything that made them look like everybody else, Smith wrote. The men's room was like a scene from the Twilight Zone. The dank space was full of veterans changing clothes. Every trash can was overstuffed with discarded army uniforms. I'm having trouble getting that image out of my head. Imagine American soldiers reluctant to advertise to their own countrymen that they were on their way home from war. This was an overreaction to horror stories they heard from replacements joining their units about how returning servicemen were being treated. Unfortunately, the stories were repeated so many times in Vietnam they became magnified, both in frequency and content. As waves of veterans returned in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the nation was locked in bitter debate about the war. 2 weeks ago, I wrote, quote, my families, including my own, were split by the anti-war movement, end quote. One reader pointed out that was an inaccurate statement. Quote, it was support of or opposition to the war itself that split families, she wrote, correctly pointing out that my statement blamed only the anti war faction. This demonstrates how deep this divide still runs 50 years later. And, the crazy freaking thing is that, you know, it could even still be that, like, like you think about this, right? Like, you're going, you go over, you do your job, basically, right? You come home and you can't even wear the uniform that you served in. You can't even, you know, acknowledge that you were over there because there's just such a contention. Like the fact that the two sides were kind of butting heads the entire time, and everybody want and they're right. Everyone wants to talk about how there was the anti-war movement and everybody, all that bad stuff, right? But nobody talks about the other side where there was support, which there was plenty of support for them. The problem was that many of those soldiers that came home, it's crazy when you talk to when you talk to a Vietnam veteran and you hear what they tell you. A lot of these guys, it was pretty much exactly what they said in the article. A lot of these guys, there was no welcome ceremony. There was no the whole unit comes back all at once, and everybody's jumping off the plane, being welcomed by their families. None of that. You would go to Vietnam, you'd go on a commercial flight, you get dropped off there, do your job for, I don't know, what, 9 months, 12 months, come back. And when you come back, unless you were deciding to wait one, unless you were deciding to actually stick around and actually continue to serve, which many of these guys that were draftees, they didn't do that. Usually, they'd take another commercial flight back home, land, and the first thing they are greeted to is people just, throwing shade at them, spitting on them, calling them baby killers, all these other things. Now, I'm sure that there maybe were some ceremonies like that, but where I guess a unit would be greeted, by people coming back home and all that good stuff. But it was it was not a welcomed um it was not a welcome party like you would think. Um the article goes on. One reader pointed out, or excuse me, men who fought in World War II, men who fought in World War II or Korea might be just as haunted by what they had personally seen and done in combat. Arnold Isaacs writes in Vietnam Shadows, the war, its ghosts, and its legacy. Actually, that makes me kind of want to get that book. Um, but they did not come home, as Vietnam vets did, to a country full of doubt about why those wars were fought and whether they had been worth while. Wow. Where does that sound familiar? Hmm. Iraq, anyone? Afghanistan, anyone? Um, right here, this is kind of like that thing where me and Matt kind of jump in and we like you would agree, right, bro? That freaking essentially this is one of those like this is where I would say our generation and the Vietnam vets really relate the most because just like the Vietnam vets, I will venture to say it's probably most likely that we probably like the experience is different. I'm not going to say the experience was worse or um worse or l- you know or better than what the Vietnam vets went through, but at the same time the similarities in what we faced are they're freaking staggering. Because when we went to Iraq, when we went to Afghanistan, the enemies we went against, they were mixed in with the public, just like in Vietnam. We didn't know who the hell the bad guys were. There was always some kind of booby trap set up for us, whether it was, IEDs, EFPs. Um, in the jungles of Vietnam, it was bungee sticks, freaking, believe it or not, and I'm going to use kind of, dumb freaking phrasing, but it was like poop bombs where they would,
Oh, that's what made punji sticks so bad, dude. Is
and
they would take bamboo, they would cut it off at an angle so it had a tip. Then
yep.
they would freaking set it in fire and toughen it in the fire. Then they would
Mhm.
roll it in animal dung and they would toughen it in fire and roll it in animal dung. And they did that probably 3 or 4 times. And it just like if you touched one of those, you had bacterial infection of like
Yep.
gangrene, all that nasty. That's what happened to Burnham. He got, something touched his arm and it just made him break out and all that kind of crazy shit. But
Yep.
yeah. But also, you brought up the comparison between the Vietnam vet and the GWAT vets.
Yeah.
Look at the pictures of when we withdrew.
Yep.
You had that Chinook helicopter at the embassy in Saigon in 1972, and you
Yep.
had the Chinook at the embassy in Kabul in 2021 when that all went down. It's like
Yep.
they're very eerily similar. It's just like
Yeah.
if you don't see the comparisons, that are you really even looking? It's like,
Yeah.
whoa.
It's not just eerie. It's a terrifying freaking revelation because governmentally speaking, it proves one thing. Our government has learned nothing since that time. Absolutely nothing since that time in terms of what it means to be sending our, you know, at that time or our time or whatever, our current generation, whatever period it is, right? Like the best of our current generations at the time, right? It proves they have no idea what they're doing when it comes to directing those men and women into dealing with tough situations like that. You know, we're basically asking them to go and, face these proxy wars and do all these ridiculous freaking things that really, in all honesty, we have no business being a part of.
And what is that quote? Those who don't learn from history are
Are
destined to
destined to
repeat it.
repeat it. And it's unfortunate, dude. It's absolutely unfortunate. Um the article goes on. I mean, this is a fairly long one, but it's so poignant in the way that it covers what like these guys have gone through. Um it says where was I? Oh yeah, here we go. Peter Larkowitz grew up in Olneyville. He graduated from Providence College in June 1967 and was in basic training by August. Assigned to the 95th Military Police Battalion, quote, "We escorted convoys, did security in the Saigon port, and manned guns on Navy PBRs, patrol boats." He wrote, "On my way home, I got heckled and yelled at twice. I thought they were immature and uninformed. I was out of Vietnam. I was safe and I did not care." End quote. He did go into the Levi's store, however, and bought jeans for the plane ride home. Quote, "just as a precaution," end quote. Elizabeth Simony of Warwick wrote about her husband who died in 2017. Quote, "Joe came home January 2nd, 1970. He was wildly welcomed by his family at TF Green, but he had been harassed at another airport on his way here. When he interviewed for one job, he was told he couldn't be hired because all Vietnam vets are crazy." So,
What's that word that's been going around in the past few years? What are we, undesirables?
undesirables or
Yeah.
deplorables.
That's it.
Yeah. Um, the workplace was not always supportive and welcoming. East Providence native Frank Capecci recalls, quote, "My parents and my fiance met me at the airport. My fiance's boss would not give her a full day off to be with me. She had to go back to work immediately after our brief reunion." If that doesn't speak a big FU from the public as to how they felt towards the American fighting man during that time frame, I really don't know what I really don't know what does.
Yeah.
Um, the fact that Vietnam vets were treated as poorly as they were, it, it's it's really a reflection, and it's funny too because this is really the boomer generation that kind of were that kind of were a part of this whole thing, this whole movement and things like that. If you speak to some boomers and where their heads at back then, it's amazing. Some of them regret how they treated these guys that came back home, because realistically speaking, it- think about it this way, folks. For those of our not so educated civilian listeners, it takes an act of Congress to send specifically the army, out to go and you know face the threats that they go out and face. What control do these young men have over what happened? They don't. They had no control, let alone any freaking desire to probably go to a foreign country that most of these guys couldn't even name on a map
Or locate on a map.
or locate on a map at the time, to go fight an enemy that they had no idea who they were, where they would be, because they mixed in with the public, to watch their friends get blown up, to get freaking mangled, right? This was not a desire of a lot of these guys. Granted, many that, like, I will say this: the amount of people that volunteered to join the army back then, or whatever branch it was back then, believe it or not, actually was it still outpaced the draftees. But if you factor in the volunteers, right, who had to deal with the draftees coming in that didn't want to be there, think about how contentious that is. There were so many different stressors that these guys had to deal with, right? It's it's immense when you think. I can't even fathom having to deal with because as myself and Mac, we were volunteers. We did that out of pure patriotism and wanting to do a bigger part for our country.
It was our time.
And yeah, exactly, it was our time. you know Back then, that's not what these guys went through, or at least many of them. You know what I mean? And even the volunteers, I'm sure there were plenty of volunteers back then who, well, while still thinking they were doing the right thing, still were wondering, well, why the hell are we here? I'm sure there was plenty of that. And it it appalls me to think that there were people that truly held such a disgust for what men in suits did, that they would take it out on those that do the bidding of the men in suits. It, it was, and I know there's going to be people that come out and say, like, you know, oh you know, you could have, said something, you could have done something different, like you're just following orders. Oh, well, yeah. What else was there to do? It was follow orders or die. It was follow orders or die. Literally, that simple of that. It was literally that simple. Whether it's the enemy killing you or if you decided to say no, you either face jail time or death. Death probably while you're overseas, over in combat area.
So
Jail.
I want to bring up another point. I don't mean to cut you off. I've been searching while you've been talking about
No,
this. I
go ahead,
remember.
dude.
So when I was in high school, I took a class with Burnham, history of the Vietnam War, right?
Me too.
And I enjoyed the hell out of that class. It was awesome. One of the things and that stuck with me, there was a book that somebody published. It's called Offerings at the Wall, right?
Yeah.
And what it is anything that is given and left at the Vietnam Wall Memorial is stored and cataloged and categorized and kept indefinitely, right? It's kept.
Nice.
So I remember reading that somebody left the Medal of Honor that they were awarded along with a letter to President Reagan, pretty much
Whoa.
denouncing and gave it and left it there at the wall. And it was his way of like protesting stuff. And I actually found that real quick. Rejection. So this is from January 22nd of 2017. The guy's name is Charlie Lightke, who gave back his Medal of Honor. He passed away back in 2017. This is like
Yeah.
almost 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Charlie Lightke, an Army chaplain in Vietnam who was awarded the Medal of Honor for rescuing more than 20 wounded men, but later gave it back in protest and became a peace activist, has died. He was 85 years old. The Army awarded Leakey the highest military decoration for his actions on December 6, 1967, when his company came under intense fire from an enemy battalion in Bien Hoa province. Despite painful wounds in the neck and foot, he carried more than 20 men to the landing zone to be evacuated during the fierce firefight. Um, he left the priesthood in '83, married former Catholic nun and peace activist Judy Balk in San Francisco. His wife introduced him to refugees in El Salvador. Teenagers whose father had been killed and tortured. I didn't believe it, but I kept going to more and more of these meetings. It became clear these people weren't blowing in the wind. He said in a 2000 interview. 20 years after his heroic actions in Vietnam, Lightke left the Medal of Honor, awarded under the name Angelo J. Lightke, and a letter to President Ronald Reagan at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington in protest of the country's foreign policy in Central America, where U.S.-backed
Oof.
dictators were fighting bloody wars against left-leaning rebels. After that, Leakey spent years protesting against the U.S. Army School of the Americas, an academy at Fort Benning, Georgia, where the U.S. Army trained soldiers for Central and South America and the Caribbean. He was sentenced to 1 year in federal prison in 2000 for entering the school without permission and splashing in its rotunda with their own blood. 2003, he
Wow.
traveled to Baghdad with other peace protesters to bear witness to the war and work with children in an orphanage and at hospitals. Um, this guy, Olive, said he remembers Leakey for his humility. It was 3 years after I met Charlie and bonded a fast friendship that I learned he was a Medal of Honor recipient when Leakey told him about his plans to renounce the medal, Olive said. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's pretty crazy. Guy
Yeah.
took off the Medal of Honor and just said, "Here, I don't want it anymore." So,
Yeah. And I'm sure the sentiment for a lot of guys was kind of that. Like, you know, I ask anybody watching this and or listening to this, um, you know, if you guys ever see a Vietnam vet, you know, don't thank them for their service. Don't say, just tell them welcome home. Because a lot of these guys, it's like the article stated, a lot of these guys and
Never got those words said to them.
they never got those words said to them. And the fact that it was never said is absolutely just it.
Atrocious.
It's atrocious and it's saddening because it a soldier is just going to do his job and come home, just like anybody else. A soldier is not going over there to be evil. I mean, granted, look, we have some, for lack of better terminology, we have some fuckheads that go into the military, right? And we have the
Jesus.
okay. It is what it is. We have some of those guys, right? That you know, whether it's even, I mean, hell, think about even in the world, even in the generation of World War II, okay, right? There was a guy, for example, I'm gonna sidebar just a little bit. Um, what was the name of that captain that in Band of Brothers that supposedly shot a bunch of guys? I was trying to remember.
Spears.
Spears, Jesus. Yes.
Ronald
Well, there's
Spears.
actually Ron Spears. Yeah. Well, actually, there's documentation, and he himself, of course, that attested to it. He actually did do those things, but there was actually rumors that went around, uh, obviously back then as well, that he had shot one of his own soldiers. All these kind of rumors spread around, all these different things, whatever. Da, 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 da. Well, a memoir came out that had him, that he spoke about, where he actually gave the full details of what happened. Well, again, I'm not going to say the terms because I'm trying to limit it, because I'm going to try and do the PG-13 thing where we limit it to 1F for right now. But that the guy he shot aimed his rifle at Captain Spears. The guy aimed his rifle at Captain Spears. He was going to kill Captain Spears. I don't remember for what, but Captain Spears turned his weapon on that guy and shot him in self-defense. This happened during a combat action. This was literally in combat. He was giving them orders and directions. The guy basically was saying, hell no, and he pulled his freaking rifle on Spears. And Spears was like, nope, not getting me home, not getting me, fool.
Well, there's also that they tell that story about that replacement out of I Company that shot Sergeant Grant in the head,
Hmm.
and they find him, and like all the guys pretty much took a part in like kicking his ass,
Beating the crap out of him, yeah.
and he's
Hmm.
like, when you talk to an officer, you're supposed to say sir. It's like, get this piece
Yeah.
of shit out of here. It's like, hey
And
man, that's what you do in wartime. Like, I'm
see,
not.
that's the thing.
You
Like,
maintain that order and discipline. Listen,
every generation had that guy, those guys, every generation had it, right? But you cannot, for the love of God, people, and because I've seen it with this generation today, that people calling my fellow freaking soldiers, my fellow service members, whether you're Marine Corps, Air Force, it doesn't matter. I've literally been in a Facebook chat where some dumbass called one of my fellow service members a baby killer, and it infuriated me
yep.
because if you don't know what we're going through over there, kiss my Puerto Rican hairy ass. Okay? All over it, all the both cheeks.
I thought you waxed.
I used to. Just
Fair.
civil my fellow civies, okay? Listen. When I did my part for the military, I really genuinely felt like I was doing the right thing. Obviously, times change, and certain things come out about the conflicts we're in, and sometimes it's not so cut and dry as we think, right? But no matter what, I still felt like I did my part and I did the right thing when I did what I did.
All right, so excuse
Mhm.
me for throwing a monkey wrench into all this,
No, go
but
ahead.
how does that how does that factor in when you say all those people that are rejecting, saying all cops are bastards and all pigs are fucking, all cops are pigs and all this kind of shit. How do
Yeah,
we? How do
they're
you?
dealing with the
How do you
same
get?
thing.
Yeah,
They're
but
dealing with the same thing.
that was a very big thing for a couple of years here, man. The whole, the anti-blue lives and all that kind of
The
stuff.
defund the police.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and some of that shit's still going on, dude.
yeah, which many of our people in government, I won't name names, uh, were touting.
Do it,
Yeah. Um,
do it.
Kamala for easily 2 years until it came to her front door. Um, you know, um, but the protesting I'm talking about is that part. But regardless, um, you know, it's what happens to those guys when they're rejected by society is kind of a double it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're being rejected by people you thought you went overseas to either do something for, defend, whatever, and to do your part, right? From the volunteer side or from the draftee side, you went over there because you were just over there to do your time, do what you had to do, get the freaking hell back. And you watch buddy of yours get blown up, right? What do you think people like that do when they come back home? Then they're spit on, they're all they reject you back. And this is where we're going to get to the flip side of this. They reject you back. Okay. There's another article in here that I feel like was pretty cool. It was from history.com. I don't know. I think it actually kind of repeats itself. It's a little bit of a shorter article, but it's kind of like a repeat. I think it goes a little bit more into detail as to why society rejected the Vietnam vets.
Is that why Vietnam
Um,
vets were treated poorly when they returned?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you. I don't know because I know we're kind of going a little over, but I don't know if you want to cover it or
No, dude,
not.
you're
Do you want
fine.
to cover it?
I mean, I can read through that kind of sort of real quick. It's not that long of a
Yeah.
read, but
Yeah. It's. I mean, like I said, it's a shorty. Like I had to cut the other one short because I forgot how long it was, but it was a good article.
okay.
I just know it was going to be a little
You
bit
want to
drawn
pull
out.
that up while I start reading?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'm going to close out some of these other tabs. I think my computer's starting to bog down a little bit.
Yeah, it happens.
Okay, so this is an article that he found. Why were Vietnam vets treated poorly when they returned? American soldiers returning from Vietnam often faced scorn as the war they had fought in became increasingly unpopular. This originally came out in November 8th of 2018, but it was updated in March 29 of 2019 by Dante A. Ciampaglia.
The,
And I read.
I think it's Dante Chiampaglia because I
Okay,
think it's in
that's
Italian.
fine. Sure.
Or
21-year-old Stephen A. Wauck arrived as an infantryman in the Army's 1st Cavalry Division in Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam, in early January 1969 to fight in an escalating and increasingly unwinnable war. By June, Wauck had been wounded twice, the second time seriously, and was sent back to the United States for treatment at Boston's Chelsea Naval Hospital. It was after returning to the U.S. and while en route to the hospital that Wauck first encountered hostility as a veteran. Strapped to a gurney in a retrofitted bus, Wauck and other wounded servicemen felt excitement at being back on American soil. But looking out the window and seeing civilians stop to watch the small convoy of hospital-bound vehicles, his excitement turned to confusion. Quote, I remember feeling like, what could I do to acknowledge them? And I just gave them the peace signal, Wauck says. And instead of getting return peace fingers, I got the middle finger. The Vietnam War claimed the lives of more than 58,000 American service members and wounded more than 150,000. And for the men who served in Vietnam and survived unspeakable horrors, coming home offered its own kind of trauma. Sorry. Some, like Wauck, said they had invectives hurled their way. As a cohort, Vietnam veterans were met with none of the fanfare and received none of the benefits bestowed upon World War II's greatest generation. This was partly due to the logistics of the never ending conflict. The Vietnam War lasted from 64 to 73, the longest war in American history, until it was overtaken by the one in Afghanistan, and servicemen
Mhm.
typically did 1 year tours of duty. Unlike conflicts with massive demobilizations, men came back from Vietnam by themselves rather than with their units or companies. For a decade, as one person was shipped off to fight, another was returning. Quote, the collective emotion of the country was divided, says Jerry Lemke, a Vietnam veteran, sociologist, and author of The Spitting Image Myth, Memory, and the Legacy of Vietnam. For the family whose son is just coming back, there aren't going to have a public welcoming home ceremony when someone's son just down the road was sent off to Vietnam. As the war ground on and became increasingly hopeless, the military personnel put through this kind of revolving door of service came to represent something many Americans would rather not accept: defeat. Vietnam was a lost war, and it was the first major war lost for MERS. Vietnam was a lost war, and it was the first major lost war abroad in American history, Lemke says. You don't have parades for soldiers coming home from a war they lost. Celebrations aside, the government also failed to make good on its promises to those who served. Why does that become a recurring theme here?
Yeah.
Hmm. Veterans returned from Vietnam were met with an institutional response marked by indifference. Peter Langenus, today the commander of VF Post 653 in New Canaan, Connecticut, commanded Delta Company, 3rd Battalion, 7th Infantry, 199th Light Infantry Brigade from 69 to 70. He led his men on operations that lasted 30 days or more in some of Vietnam's most inhospitable conditions. Quote, without shaving, bathing, or changing clothing. None of that, he says, prepared me for the reception at home upon our return. Back in the States, Langen has quickly discovered the GI benefits available from Vietnam veterans, quote, were almost non existent, end quote. While living in New York, he developed symptoms of malaria, a tropical disease fairly uncommon in the concrete jungle. Yet he was denied VA health care because he didn't display those symptoms in Vietnam. He graduated from Notre Dame prior to being commissioned, and his service returned to and after his service returned to law school to cash in his individual educational benefits. At a time when I was paying $300 a credit, my entire education benefit was $126. And when it came to finding a job, he was met with thinly veiled disgust and discrimination from law firms upon learning he was a Vietnam infantry veteran. The society really was ill prepared to give these guys what they deserved, says Kristen Appy, professor of history at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and author of 3 books on Vietnam. Quote, they were not necessarily looking for a parade, but they were certainly looking for basic human support and help in readjusting to civilian life after this brutal war. Part of the reason was economic. While the economy after World War II was one of the most robust in American history, during and after Vietnam, the nation was in a death spiral of stagflation and economic malaise. And as more and more wartime atrocities came to light, there was a national implication of guilt and shame placed on Vietnam veterans as participants in and avatars of a brutal, unsuccessful war. In
Mm.
popular culture, the stereotype of broken, homeless Vietnam vet began to take hold thanks to films like The Deer Hunter, Coming Home, and First Blood.
Yeah. And if you guys know about that one scene in First Blood, that really powerful scene, like right at the end, it's probably one of Sylvester Stallone's best acting work.
We just want our country to love us as much as we love it. That's the one you're talking about.
No, I'm talking about where he's talking about how he lost one of his buddies and he just went for it. It was, I'll show you later.
Okay. It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
Yeah.
It would take nearly 20 years after the end of the war for America to get right with its Vietnam veterans. The dedication of Vietnam Veterans Memorial in 1982 began the process, but many identify the Gulf War of 1991 with its national flag waving, yellow ribbon cultural mobilization, and the grand celebrations of a successful campaign as ending the Vietnam Syndrome. Quote, the Vietnam veterans, we couldn't believe it. We could not understand getting letters from school kids, said Langinus, also a veteran of Desert Storm. You couldn't believe that people were cheering you. Since 9/11, patriotic gestures like wearing flag pins and saying thank you for your service became common as more troops are sent to Iraq and Afghanistan. But the specter of Vietnam still lingers, and some of that war's veterans view such acts with a wary glance.
Quick question, bro. Quick
Yeah,
question.
I'm pretty
And
much at the end there anyway, so.
yeah, so out of curiosity, and I've always wondered this because it's been something that really like stuck with me. Like after thinking about what the Vietnam veterans went through, considering that this is just me being honest, I've noticed that the people that I think say thank you for your service the most tend to be those boomers, those people that grew up in that and a lot of the times they're not even people that served in Vietnam or served over there or served in the military at that time, right? Do you think that there's like some level of a little bit of like guilt, like maybe they were involved in some of these protests and thought real hard about like, well, shit, maybe these guys weren't a bunch of ass hats and a bunch of ass bags and shit bags.
Okay,
Maybe
so you're
like you
saying
get yeah, go
okay,
ahead.
so let me just make sure I'm understanding. So in your expression, you're saying you're asking if I think that people were saying thank you for your service to us as a way of, kind of making up for the fact that they may have protested or spit on or called somebody a baby killer or just looked at them all side eye and shit. I mean, that's a very good question. I
You
think
know,
that could be something that could maybe be looked at. I
I
don't know
wonder.
because I don't I would be hesitant to look at that because I think at the same time it's a different context because with Vietnam it was going on for that long, but with us, like when everything first kicked off, we were attacked here, so it was very
Yeah.
much like World War II, where we were attacked here. Shit happened, a lot of people died, and then we go on from there and go do our part and all that kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
in a way, I think it also. I don't want to say that. Oh, I don't know. That's a good question, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
Makes you think though. It makes
I
you think. I
often
mean,
wonder if maybe that is the case and I'm not going to say I'm not going to say it's for like everybody, but I'm sure that there are people
I
that
would say maybe there's a small percentage of that. Yeah, where
I
they're
would
kind
say
of
more
going
than a
out
small
there.
percentage, like at least like a third, if not a little bit more than that of that generation that maybe is like, fuck, we were ass to them. And like, because
Yeah, I could
the
see that, but again, I just think it's the difference of the situations. I mean, Vietnam
yeah,
was very unpopular, whereas folks that were, I mean,
it
dude,
was,
like
yeah.
there. So I listen. This is gonna sound, a little bit weird. So I have nothing against the late Toby Keith, fantastic artist, caught the country music market at a very niche time. A lot of these
Yeah.
ballsy, like, great songs about, like Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue and, American Soldier. Great tunes. If I'm being honest, I heard him so much in the 7 or the 6 years I was in the Army. I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I don't need to hear any Toby Keith for a while. Like, everywhere we went, it was playing, especially, like, being in the Florida Guard, you got a lot of good old boys and all that kinda shit, so, like, somebody's got the MP3 or they got, like, a speaker or something, they're playing shit off their phone and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it was just it was such a it was like an enforced a forced ingrained memory of my military service, like, it was
Yeah.
always there. It's just like, I kinda stopped listening to him for a little while because 'cause I'm just like, "I'm good." Like, I got enough of my fill during 6 years when I was in the Army.
Yeah.
But since like I recently came out with a playlist called War Junkie, which refers to that quote from Hoot in Black Hawk Down. They're gonna ask me,
Yeah.
they go, hey Hoot, what are you, some kind of war junkie? I ain't gonna say a goddamn thing because they're not gonna get it. You know that whole conversation he has with Sergeant Eversman right there towards the end of the
Mm-hmm.
movie. That's why I
They're not
call it
going to
that,
understand that it's the man right next to you. Makes all the difference. That's all it is.
and that's all it is. Yeah, and that's such a powerful line because it's like, fuck,
Yeah.
dude, like there really is. But I mean, and I when I put that playlist on, like there was a lot of other songs on there that like I listened to, like when we were in the trucks over in Seas and working out and all that kind of stuff. Like you know, the song "Bodies," let the
Let the
bodies hit the
bodies hit the floor.
like,
The
yeah,
bodies hit the floor. Let
like
the bodies hit
you
the floor.
can't have a
The
G
bodies
Watt
hit
playlist. You can't have a G Watt playlist without that song. Like, there's so many
the
other
No.
songs like you just can't. So that's why I have that playlist called War Junkie. But I went back and I was listening to it. I'm like, you can't have music from this time frame without including Toby Keith. So I put it back on there.
Yeah.
I just don't always listen to that song. Like I gotta be in kind of
Mm-hmm.
like I gotta
The
want to listen
mood.
to it. Yeah. So, but I don't know. Get back to your original question though. Do you think there's people that said thank you for your service as a way to make up for possibly being shitheads earlier to Vietnam vets? That's a damn good question. I honestly don't know, but I would be very curious to see the results of that. And like,
Yeah. I would too,
we,
because I think it's and I'm just being honest here, I really do think it's a lot more than we think. Like, because if you think about how, like, because I've dude, I've gone down the rabbit hole on like
yeah, you
analytics and
have.
shit like that. Um, the amount of
You're good, bro.
the amount the amount of people that, especially back then, because let's just be honest, back then, people that were doing a lot of the protesting, liberal.
You're talking during the Vietnam conflict.
Correct.
Okay.
Um, there's a shift to a more kind of
Accepting.
conservative, to a more conservative, say, mind view, purview, if you will,
Okay.
as they get up there in age and they get to start because there's an evolution in the way people think. Um, and I think they're in that aspect. I really do think that it's a lot more than we think there is, but it's not something that's typically really talked about because obviously, things like Korea, things like Vietnam, they're not really talked about as much as they, in my honest opinion, as much as they should be, because it's kind of one of those I guess you could say it's kind of like those dark parts of our history where we just don't really want to you really don't want to talk about. We kind of just want to shove it in a back room where it's kind of like, oh yeah, we'll leave it right there, and then we'll open the door and like kind of look into it every once in a while, but yeah, we'll keep that door closed, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you.
And
So when they were talking,
I think it's a lot more than we think, bro.
I'd be curious to find out. But I thought of another couple of scenes. There's another great scene they left out when they were talking about like the deer hunter, and they were
Yeah.
talking about First Blood. There's that scene in Jarhead when all the Marines are coming home, and there's that old Vietnam vet who gets on the bus and
Yeah.
he shakes hands with Jamie Foxx's Staff Sergeant
Yes, I
Simon.
remember that part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's just like, Semper Fi, you did it! You did it right! You did it good, man! I'm starting to lose my voice. It's starting to crack. But he's sitting here, he's like, you did it right, and all this stuff. He's like, can I just sit on your bus, there, Staff Sergeant? Like, he never got that experience, so he's just like
Yeah.
sitting here telling this guy Semper Fi, and like, you feel really shitty for the guy. You're just like, fuck. Here's a guy that probably went over. He's all kind of tore up and got PTSD or some
Yeah.
shit, some kind of mental anguish that follows him around, and he just wanted a little bit of that moment just to say,
There's a kind of mental torture, man, that
yeah,
goes along with that whole idea of again, like it's again, I've stated it a couple of times, but you go over there, you're fighting an enemy, you have no idea who the hell they are. They could be the freaking kid sitting on the freaking bench across from you in a little, you know, mud shack freaking or
A mud
palm
hut. Yep.
fronds or mud hut or whatever freaking area. Like the little kid could come and offer you a freaking Pepsi. The Pepsi's a freaking it's a bomb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's again, it's staggering to think about the similarities between the things that we went through in Vietnam and the things that we went through in Afghanistan and Iraq.
So let's circle this back around one more time because
No.
I just brought up something. Okay. As we talked about in the first part of the show, once we started hitting the show topic, we gave the definition of rejection as being the dismissing or refusing of a proposal idea.
Yep.
Okay, so you were in Iraq, you were how old?
When I went to Iraq, I was 22.
22. Okay. All
God,
right. Hold on.
Jesus.
Yeah, dude, you can see by all the gray hair that we're getting fucking old, man.
Freaking 16 years ago. Jesus.
I turned 21 in Afghanistan in
Yeah.
2005 after we had just got there. So it's coming
Yeah.
up on 20 years for me this next year.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when we talk about rejection and being the dismissal of an idea, how much did you reject the idea of like, whatever. If shit happens, it happens. Like, I could get blown up any day. I'm gonna fucking sit here and I'm gonna smoke cigars and live life a little bit. Which sounds absolutely bonkers, being in a fucking war zone. But if you think about it, it's kind of like you have to reject that negativity of like, yeah, we could fucking get blown up at any goddamn day because so we could get mortared, we could get
Hmm.
freaking whatever. Now, being up in the north part of the country where I was at, there
Yeah.
wasn't that big of a threat, at least at the time.
I was gonna
The
say at the
Northern
time,
Alliance,
probably,
yeah,
because
because it was
shit started getting
2005.
real crazy.
Oh yeah, it sure did. But like at the
Yeah.
time, the North was where we had established the Northern Alliance. We had established like the working relationship with the Northern Alliance with
You never know,
General
dude.
Dosum.
I
I
see
mean,
it. I see it as divine providence, bro. Like God was, he calmed it down for you while you were there, so that you could come back home, bro.
so then why doesn't
That's
he
just
calm it
me.
down when everybody's over there? Why is it that I made it through without any type of tick, and when other guys made it through with, getting Purple Hearts and getting CIBs and all that kind of stuff? We could go down that rabbit
That rabbit
hole
hole.
very easily. But I mean, do you think that you have to reject the idea that anything's gonna be, anything bad's gonna happen? You kind of just have to be like, I'm fucking young, I'm fucking cockstrong. It's like whatever. I'm gonna take the world by the nuts and shove it up its ass.
Well, the way I see it, like based on your perspective, I'll give it to you this way. Like I rejected the fact that I would come home at all, um, only because I
Don't
knew
tell your wife this conversation is taking place.
she's more than likely going to hear it. Um, but I rejected, like, I mean, I rejected the idea that I would be coming home at all at the time, which I think in the long run saved me mentally speaking, because you know for lack of better terminology, I made peace with God that, hey, uh I'm probably gonna get killed in combat,
If you need to call me
so
home, I'm not mad at you.
basically that was pretty much the idea.
Fascinating.
And you know it kept me from going nuts while I was over there, I feel. um Especially when there were moments where you knew there was something off, like I kind of call it the combat sixth sense. Like, and there's a few of the guys that
CSS, the
when
combat spidey sense.
yeah, there's a few of the guys that when I would talk to them, that there was a few of us in the group that would like think and be like, something feels off about this. And sure enough, like a little while afterwards, like something would happen. Um, that happened actually at least once or twice, if not a couple more times than that when we were over
Right.
there. Excuse me.
Good push.
Especially when our company commander's vehicle got blown up. Um, like
Was he KIA or no?
no, no, he survived. I mean, he had a broken foot, but he
Considering how bad VBIEDs were at the time and the fact you guys are in strikers,
yeah,
like, geez, that's not that bad, man.
yeah.
All
Well,
things
the
considered,
strikers could take a lot, dude.
yeah,
You could blow the engine on that thing, and you could still, on all four tires blown out, drive that thing back to freaking CP. Like it was, they're badass vehicles, dude. They really are. They're badass vehicles. Uh, or I should say, all eight tires, because that's happened. Um, but Cap, he ended up going home for the remainder of the freaking deployment. Um, but yeah, that like that day we had that weird feeling as we drove over a spot, like, and it was weird because like I was thinking to myself as we're driving, and I'm like, something feels off about where we're at. And sure enough, I remember hearing my squad leader at the time going like, something's off about where we're at. We drive past that area. Freaking Cap was right behind us. I think like two vehicles down, if not one, if I remember correctly. And then as soon as he hit, boom, Dunsky. Because
yeah,
we were in convoy. It might have been two vehicles down because we were a good ways past it after we were a good ways past it by the time he had hit it, and it went up.
yeah,
Because I believe, if I remember correctly, we had broken off, like our platoon had gone past it, and then if I remember correctly, the platoon that Cap would usually freaking patrol with went over it, and then his vehicle got hit.
right,
And it was but you had that, like, something's off.
yeah.
And sure enough, like,
And
I
that's and
kid you
that's
not, it was
fascinating.
like
How
5-10 minutes later, boom.
well, it's fascinating too when you think about it. Like, think about those times you've been out in the like just on bivouac. You've been out on like weekend drill or like at AT, and you're out in the
Mhm.
field, and like your senses just get so super focused and super tuned into things. You'll be sitting out there, and all of a sudden you're just like, "Hey, somebody over in that direction's got fucking jalapeno cheese. I will trade you some peanut butter. Like, let's go." I can smell it. Who's got it? Let's work out some. Let's fucking do a drug deal. Let's make this shit happen.
Hey man, that jalapeno cheese was freaking, that was the best freaking shit in the freaking
Dynamite, dude. But
MRE.
at this, but yes, but at the same time, it's like just that spidey sense, like you talk about, that combat sixth sense of just like knowing shit, and that's just in a training environment. You're like, hey, somebody get
Yeah.
a jalapeno cheese. Come over my way. I got some shit to trade for you. I got some
Hell yeah.
beverage. I got some cocoa beverage powder. Let's make something happen. But yeah, also like when you talk about when several people has to have that same kind of like something's fucky. I don't know what it is, but something's hinky and something's gonna be fucky later on.
Yep.
It's not just a coincidence. It's like, oh shit, everyone's same fucking radar is tuned in. It's like
Yep.
stand by for incoming. It's like fuck. So, but yeah, man, I thought about that. Like because like I remember a lot of times, dude, people would send cigars and care packages or whatnot, and I was like, I could die at any day. We're in the northern part of the country. We're in a third world country. There's
Yep.
unknown, heavily armed assholes in any one of these directions at a certain distance away. We're up in the mountains. Who knows? Somebody could shove enough C4 into a fucking goat's ass and make a flambe bomb. Oh,
And they sure did. They made bombs out of anything. Dog
right.
carcasses, for crying out loud.
So I think in a way you kind of just have to come with that piece of like shit can happen, and you're going to reject the fact of like, well, it's going to be just a quiet, dull. No, there was
Yeah.
a couple of times we had some shit going on, It's just fucking weird. We had a guy self-det in the square around the Blue Mosque. Like some guy just picked his head up with a pitchfork, threw it in the rickshaw, and fucking took off. It's like, what? What the fuck? Strange shit. But yeah, so
Yeah.
that is our discussion on rejection, and that kind of, I love these organic conversations we have. We kind of make a couple of notes here and there, but you never know where these conversations are going to go. Like we talked about, like the
Yeah.
Vietnam vet scenes and all that kind of shit, and the rejection of like the Vietnam vet, like being the biggest tragedy to the military man in the past 100 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
also just the fact of like bringing up like that other kind of stuff. It's like, hey man, you never know. So, but we would love for you, anybody watching or listening at home, if you have some comments about the show or our discussion, like please feel free to leave a comment. Whether you're watching on YouTube, if you're live, or you're watching, go back and watching it after it's already been aired and posted, on any one of our social media platforms, anywhere you can listen to the show. Alan was going to tell you about those here in a few minutes when I turn it back over to him and stuff. But we love to hear your feedback. If you think, hey, I agree with you, I don't agree with you. If you want to go back to like the old school of point counterpoint on SNL back in the day, going, Jane, you ignorant
Yeah.
slut, and then tell me how
Shit.
I'm
Leave us
wrong.
comments about it in the
Yeah,
Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble comment sections. We'd love to see what you
we would
guys
love
think.
to see that shit. Absolutely. So, but if you've watched our show before, or if you haven't, we talk about how this show came to be. If you have watched the show before, you've heard this before, but it's important to remember this part. So, Alamo and I have known each other since high school, which was a long ass time ago, and we
Yeah.
became pretty good friends really quickly. But we have kind of stayed in
You're
touch over the
crazy
years.
makes it matches like crazy.
Ah, pretty much.
Yep.
So, but we stayed in touch over the years. We worked together at one point. We had this guy that worked with us named John. John was a good dude, and we thoroughly enjoyed working with him. Man, we had so much, like just the slowest, worst days at work were just so much fun, and just went by
Yep.
faster when the three of us were together. We just did some dumb stuff, and just we had a blast. And
Ass
Alamo and
hat
I,
patrol in full effect, baby.
yeah, the asshat trio. But anyway, we worked together. We all kind of went our own way, and then Alamo and I kind of linked back up a while back, and we started talking about doing something together. Well, during that time, we found out that John, unbeknownst to us, had some demons, and he solved it solved a temporary problem with a very permanent solution, and he
Yeah.
killed himself via suicide. And that really kind of shook me up because that's the first person that I've known that uh, died by their own hand. I've seen other guys that have died in combat or accidents or that kind of shit. That happens as part of life, but it's different when it's of their own doing. So I mentioned Alamo. I was like, "Hey, did you hear about Johnny?" He goes, "No, I got to reach out to him. It's his birthday coming up." I'm like, "You can't. He's gone." And I said, what you were talking about doing like that podcast and shit. I was like, I'm kind of in now. Like, I feel like that's a sign that we need to do this. And he was talking about, he's like, what do you know about a podcast? I'm like, I don't know shit about a podcast. He goes, it can't be that hard. They freaking stuck a monkey in outer space. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I mean, you want to break it down Barney style and keep it infantry guys stupid. I mean, we can do that shit. So, in the process of coming up with what our vision was going to be and what our message was, we came up with the name, the Battle Bros Podcast. And we also came up with the Battle Bros Code. And what the Battle Bros Code is, it's 4 easy tenets that you can use to help keep yourself in the fight, to keep yourself here, to fight another day. Okay. We don't want anybody going down that road that John took because it's a road
Correct.
that doesn't lead anywhere. It dead ends, and it really fucking dead ends.
Yep.
So if you can remember these 4 easy things, you're gonna do pretty good. Okay, so just easy to remember: BROS. I mean, like I said, keep it simple. Be tenacious. No matter what you do in life, do it to the fullest and utmost of your abilities. Don't go out there and just say, I'm gonna put in a half-ass effort. No, whatever that job is, if it's raking your yard, if it's doing some area beautification, if it's washing the sergeant major's
Basic dude stuff.
Humvee, if you're doing basic dude stuff. Exactly. Whatever that case may be, go out and do it to the fullest. In the words of the immortal Ron Swanson, don't half-ass two things, whole ass one thing. All right, go out and do it to the fullest, man. That's all you got to know about that. R, refuse to surrender. There's going to be plenty of times in life that come up where things don't go your way. Um, you might get a little sidetracked. You might get a little off mission or off path or whatever.
Yep.
That's fine. You get your, you miss the jump, you miss the drop zone by 5 miles. Okay, pack up your shit and hike it to where you got it, to where the rally point is. Whatever the case may be. All right,
Freaking
refuse to
hooey.
surrender. Just keep going and freaking drive on. Oh, obliterate your obstacles. Kind of going along with the last one. Whatever those obstacles are, man, get them out of your fucking way. Whether it's, if you got to scale a wall to get into a compound, if you have to, get off the roadway, travel a half mile down the road, and then get back on the road during a land nav course, whatever the hell you got to do, like, freaking get it done. If you got to go over a bridge, if you got to go under a bridge, if you got to breach a wall with some C4 Bangalores or knock it down with an armored vehicle, whatever the case may be, I'm not here to judge. But you got to do shit like that sometimes. Whatever it takes, obliterate your obstacles and fucking drive on and hit the OBJ, baby. S, most importantly, S, seek out help in a time of need. As with our friend John, there's nothing we can do to bring John back, and that's a travesty. If it meant John was here, that we didn't have to do this show because he was still here with us, I'd be okay with that because John would still be
Yep.
here, but he's not. So just know that no matter what, there's always going to be people to help you in your time of need. You just got to find those kind of people. It could be a coworker, a family member, a friend, somebody you served with in the military, whatever the case may be. If you just call them up, say, "Hey, man, I'm not in a good place," bend their ear. I've done it with this guy a couple of times now, and he's done it to me a couple of times, and it's like I don't ever second guess that. Like that's so crucially fucking important for people in our generation. It's like,
Sure the hell is.
don't ever shortchange that shit. If you don't have those kind of resources, there are options out there for you. If you ever feel like you're going to harm yourself, there is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Fuck, I got dry mouth like a crazy son of a bitch right now.
Dries his mouth.
Um, you can either call 1-800-273-8255. Again, that's 1-800-273, and then type the word TALK, Tango, Alpha, Lima, Kilo, TALK. And then press 1 when you get on there. Or you can dial 988. Again, that's 988. And do the same thing. Press 1. They will get somebody on the phone to talk to you and keep you where you need to be. Okay? This is the kind of thing that we're trying to stop. 22 veterans a day on average commit suicide. And that's our pandemic that we're trying to stave and stop. Okay?
Yeah, buddy.
So if you can remember those 4 things, be tenacious, refuse to surrender, obliterate your obstacles, seek out help in a time of need, you're going to have a better than fucking shitty chance of, making it through the day and fighting to see another day. So just
Heck
remember those.
yes.
I'm going to pass it off to Alamo. I'm probably going to be clearing my throat, so I'm going to mute my microphone. But Alamo, take it away, please.
Freaking hooey. If you want to get in contact with us on the social medias, you can do that on multiple different places. You can do that over on the Facebook at facebook.com/battlebros.podcast. You can also do that on Instagram at battlebros_podcast. You can also catch us over on VX, formerly known as Twitter, at BattleBrosPC. On each one of those platforms, you could go ahead and contact us via the instant messaging service that's there. You can leave us comments. You can leave us show ideas. Things that you guys want to hear. We're open for it. We're here for it. We want to know what you guys think, what you guys want to hear, and because we want to give you more of what you want. If, for example, you wanted to contact us, about maybe you're feeling down, whatever, but you don't want to make it as public as it would be on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, you can do that over at our Gmail, which is battlebrospc@gmail.com. That is battlebrospc@gmail.com. where you can send us a message, say, hey, I'm not feeling so great, or, I got a friend of mine that's not feeling so great, family member, whatever the case may be. Because remember, every episode that we do is geared towards mainly veterans and such. But at the same time, it's not always geared towards, the veteran community. That you can it can be geared towards pretty much anyone. Um, the message that we have is a message for anyone and everyone willing to listen. Um, and we want to hear from anybody. And the whole point of this is to build a community. So if you guys feel as if you have something you want to get off your chest and you're not so sure that, you could do that with family, friends, or, whatever, because maybe you're embarrassed. Maybe you're feeling like you're you're probably going to be told the same thing you hear all the time sometimes, depending on what it is. Yeah, go ahead, jump on that email and send us a message. We'll be more than happy to talk to you and, keep you here, because hey, the world deserves you, and you deserve to be here for the world.
My
So
daughter asked me a
basically,
long time ago. She goes, "How many followers do you guys have?" And I'm like, that was kind of like a very kid question to ask. I'm like,
yeah.
I said, I don't know. I said, we've had views all over the world. We've had people in Ireland and UK and all that kind of stuff, which is cool if you think about
Fantastic for you.
if you think about that kind of outreach it has, where you're reaching people across, the waters of this great planet and on different continents and all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. I said, what's going to matter the most is when we have one person that we say, hey, I was going to kill myself. And I didn't because I heard your guys' message. I heard a show. I came across your show somehow from like, three people before me down the road. And I heard it and
Yep.
I was listening to it and it made me stop and think and go, you know what? I don't need to go down this road. That to me
Yeah.
is more important than all the followers on social media. We appreciate you guys. Don't think I'm twisting my words and saying, oh, you guys don't matter. Not the case. We still very much appreciate your viewership, your consumership of our content, because we couldn't do what we do without the viewers and the listeners, on your end. If we
That's right.
didn't have that as a resource, we wouldn't get these messages out. We wouldn't have people paying it forward, passing it along. It might not be that you need to hear the message. It could be, like I said, the person they give it to somebody else, they give it to somebody else, and they have somebody that hears it, and they're
That's
just like,
right.
shit, like okay, that they're talking to me here. I'm gonna hang around for sure. So,
Heck yeah.
but if you can just remember those four things, folks, like we talked about, be tenacious, refuse to surrender, obliterate your obstacles, seek out help in a time of need. You're going to have a better than not chance of staying here and staying in the fight to fight another day. So we appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for listening or watching or both. This has been episode 095 on the subject of rejection of the Battle Bros podcast with myself, Mac, my co-host here, my co-host and best friend Alamo. We thank you all for stopping by, and we hope to see you again soon. Please remember, it is the holidays. Take a few minutes and just take your time. Be safe.
That's
Be
right.
calm. Everybody's in a freaking hurry. It's the mad rush. Just take a minute.
And reach out. This is the time of year where a lot of people get very depressed and very down.
Yeah, the
Reach
holiday
out.
blues. That's real shit, man. That
Yep.
is real stuff. So reach out if you need it. Reach out and seek out help in a time of need if you need to. Okay, don't go down
Damn
that
right.
road, folks. Okay, but we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Don't know when that is going to be yet. We'll probably take some kind of a break here for the holidays. Not sure exactly when. So we'll be off for a couple of weeks for Christmas and New Year's. We're going to see what that looks like first. We'll probably have another episode or two maybe before we do so, but just keep checking out our Facebook page, our social media profiles on X, Facebook, um, Instagram, all that good stuff. Um, Check out our YouTube page, and you'll be stay up to date with us. So, again, thanks so much for stopping by, for listening to our conversation, and we hope to see or hear from you all soon. So until then, this has been the Battle Bros, and we are going to say good night and have a good one.
Battle Bros. Oh.